Nobody in here? So we did a challenge, well, Steve and I know, we did a challenge last April, and we had quite a few people participate. A lot of good results in terms of, you know, physical results, performance in terms of their workouts and improvements on the benchmark type workouts. And then just energy levels. Everyone reports that, you know, their energy levels are stable throughout the day. They have a lot more energy to do more with like their kids, at work, they're a lot more focused. And a lot of that is tied to insulin, basically. The insulin ups and downs of when you eat sugars and carbohydrates. You have large spikes, and then you also have peaks and valleys, basically. It's never stable, it's up and down. So, what I'll do is, I'll kind of just keep it very brief and simple, and kind of focus more on like questions and answers from you all. I think that are probably a little more productive than me just talking for an hour or two or something like that. So, basically, paleo is getting back to the basics. You saw that the Paleo in a Nutshell video. You know, like I said, it's kind of comical and a funny video, but it definitely hits on all the points and kind of makes it fun. So getting into why grains, legumes, and dairies are bad for us, I like to kind of break it down into, I call it eyes are the enemy, so insulin and inflammation. If you remember one thing from the whole lecture, I remember that eyes are the enemy, insulin and inflammation. And when you look at the food that you're eating, if they cause your insulin to spike or your blood sugar to raise, or if they cause inflammation, you probably shouldn't be eating it. So that kind of makes it really simple. Getting into, so I guess talking about inflammation first, you saw in the video the difference between, say, factory farmed cattle, factory farmed fish. What they do there is they force feed the cows and now even fish and feed them like corn pebbles or tablets. And they do this for a reason. It makes them fat quickly, but they're not designed to eat that at all. So it does two things basically. One, especially with cattle, it ends up kind of eating their stomach lining from the inside out. And what they do is they have to pump the cattle full of antibiotics just to keep it alive long enough until it's slaughtered. So that does two things. We're eating meat that's full of antibiotics, and when we actually need antibiotics for sicknesses, they're a lot less effective because they're already, you know, in our system. But the other thing is, since cows are eating corn, what it does is it's horrible for cows. Corn grains are horrible for cows, and it causes them to get fat, and it's full of omega-6 fats. So when we eat the cow that's eating corn and grains, we're ingesting that as well, and that's just loaded with omega-6 fats, which by themselves aren't horrible. But what we'll see in America or in the world in general today is the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is what's important. And right now, the American diet specifically would be like maybe 1 omega-3 fat for every 10 or 15 omega-6s, and it's supposed to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So when you're eating foods that are higher in omega-6s, that would include, you know, vegetable oils, processed foods, factory farm cattle, factory farm fish, you know, anything kind of in that realm, it raises your omega-6s, and those are the bad fats. That's kind of what leads to, you know, I guess, higher cholesterol, heart disease, things of that nature. But now when you look at the other side of the spectrum, you look at pasture-raised, grass-fed, and then wild-caught fish. So pasture-raised chicken, grass-fed cattle, and wild-caught fish, they're eating grass, which in turn, the grass is very high in omega-3. So when they're eating the grass, their meat that we're eating from them or ingesting from them is very high in omega-3s, which is a fat that actually is anti-inflammation. So omega-3s kind of tame down inflammation, and omega-6s raise them up quite a bit. So when I talk about the two eyes, the first eye is inflammation, and a lot of that starts with not only the grains, legumes, and dairy, which all cause inflammation with a low level of inflammation, but also the meats that you eat. So you have to kind of watch both. A lot of you might ask the question, you know, if you have to eat one, what would you rather eat, grains and dairy and legumes or the non-grass-fed, non-pasture-raised meats. I think personally the meat would still be a better choice. It's more nutritionally dense than the grains. The grains do more damage in terms of your gut lining. A lot of diseases like IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis are all related to inflammation as well. It's inflammation of the gut lining. So the other I in the equation is insulin. Foods that basically cause insulin to spike are just sugars, carbohydrates for the most part. So if we get carbohydrates, grains, actually dairy, legumes do as well. And what that does is insulin actually causes, it's a hormone that tells your body to store fat. So I can kind of draw, I guess, a chart here really quickly. Let's see. So insulin affects your energy levels throughout the day, and it also affects your ability to maintain your weight or lose weight. So if you're having issues with losing weight, but you're eating like fruit, and you think you're eating healthy with fruits and grains and everything, a lot of that's tied back to insulin and not actually the fat that you're ingesting. So a little diagram, I don't know if everyone can see it. Do you see over here? Okay. So your body's natural state, natural insulin levels, if this was a graph right here, would be at a low, stable level right here. When you eat sugars, grains, even dairy, legumes, depending on I guess, where they fall in the glycemic index, after you ingest, say, grains, or if you eat fruit, your body will basically produce as much insulin as it takes to get your body back to the level where you're naturally supposed to be. The problem with that is it never gets you back to the level where you were originally at. What it does is it brings you down, and this is going to be like your insulin crash. This is where you're going to feel really hungry, tired. If you've ever had a big lunch, you're just out of it, you're tired, and after 2 hours you're going to feel hungry again, and that's why your body wants you to get back up to the natural level. So depending on what you eat for your next meal, let's just say you have, I don't know, rice and chicken, your insulin would shoot back up again. Again, it wants to pull you back down, but it ends up making you crash even harder. And then it's kind of like just a vicious cycle. And what you'll notice is when you kind of eliminate the foods that cause your insulin to spike and crash, you'll have them at just a stable level of energy. This would be, a chart not only for your insulin, but it also shows like your energy levels throughout the day. So, if you're somebody who relies heavily on coffee in the morning, look at what you drink, look at what you're eating for breakfast in the morning, and most likely it's something that spikes your insulin. When you're crashing down here, you're gonna want coffee, and then you're hungry again, so it'll go up and down. So it's kind of a simple way to describe it. So a little fact, I guess, is obesity will cost the U.S. more than $550 billion by 2020. I don't think the FDA and anybody's doing us any favors by telling helping the American people know what to eat. But a lot of it's political in terms of I guess big agriculture and big business and trying to keep everybody happy. Even healthcare. I mean, if everybody was healthy, hospitals, doctors, they wouldn't be as prosperous. So what we have to remember here is fat doesn't make us fat. So if you focus on eating like the right foods and the right fats, that in itself is not going to make us fat. It's the hormone that's telling us to store that makes us fat. And that's insulin. So the more insulin in food causes your body to produce, the more likely you're going to store that as fat. So, a lot of times people wonder why they can't lose weight. It's because you're constantly telling your body to store, and not use it for energy. we kind of went over the foods that cause insulin spikes and inflammation. If you have questions, I guess I can provide on my blog a big list of everything that causes inflammation, everything that causes insulin. I would say if you're eating something that does both, that's absolutely like the worst thing you can do. If you have to do something, maybe it's one or the other. Combining this is bad. There's also studies that show that carbs and sugars are more addictive than drugs and cocaine. The same neurons fire when people have use drugs as they do when they eat carbs and sugars and when they crave it. So it's definitely telling as to why people can't give up their carbs. When I talk to a lot of people about paleo, they always say, "Oh, I can't give up my dairy, or I can't give up my bread, or I can't give up my pasta." And it's physiological, it's emotional attachment. There's a lot of things that tie you into the food that you eat, but it is just physically addicting. Usually, like within the first 7 days of if you do strict paleo, it's kind of like you're weaning yourself off of a drug. You don't feel that great because your body's used to going to sugars and superficial sources of energy from the food that you eat, the carbohydrates that you eat, for fuel for the day. And when you cut that all out, your body has to readjust. So the first week, I would say, is the hardest. But once your body resets, it goes to burning fat for fuel. And as you saw in the video, we've been evolving for millions of years without agriculture. Any of that, it's fairly recent within the last 10,000 years. But our bodies are really designed to burn fat for fuel. 10,000 years in the grand scheme of things isn't long enough to make any physiological changes compared to millions of years leading up to that. So it kind of makes sense. And you'll feel it in the energy levels that you have throughout the day. When you're on strict paleo, and once you're really going and your body's really adapted to it, you're literally just you have a level high energy throughout the day, and there are no peaks and valleys. And it's a lot of it's due to the insulin, and then a lot of it's due to your body just knowing where to go for the fat quickly for your energy. So let's see here. Do you guys have any questions so far?
I bought the book.
Okay, which one?
Not the Paleo Solution diet, not the, he's a doctor. I forgot to bring it. I just started it, like 34 pages in.
Okay.
That's CrossFit. He has a gym in Northern California.
Oh, Rob.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one of the best resources. He's one of the original people that brought this diet out, I guess, into the public.
Okay.
So it's a great book. It's good to reinforce. I always recommend don't blindly just follow anybody who tells you to eat a certain way. Really research it and see if it makes sense to you, and then try it. Because that's going to be your best indicator, I think, is how you feel. A lot of the times people make recommendations of, you got to try this diet or that diet. But I just say, if you try paleo, you're really going to feel how you're supposed to feel every day. If you don't feel good and it doesn't work for you, you really didn't lose much. You just lost 30 days of eating your favorite foods. You can go back to it, but I haven't met anybody, I've worked with a lot of people to get them into the paleo type of diet, including my whole family and friends and everybody. Nobody really goes back. I mean, some people do it 100% for the full 30 days. And they might tone it back a little and have cheat meals, but nobody really goes back to the way they ate just because they're more aware of what they're putting in their body. So
Brian.
Yeah.
You speak so much about Greek yogurt. So you can't eat a plain Greek yogurt, and so talk about that.
Yeah, so yogurt, dairy, there's variations of paleo. Paleo is no dairy. There's a variation of primal, which allows you to eat dairy, but they recommend, I guess grass-fed, organic, and whole milk. What happens when you eat low-fat stuff? They take the fat out of, so say you buy 2% milk, they take the fat out of the milk, but composition-wise they have to replace it with something. You can't just take fat out and not add something, and they add sugar. So that goes back to the eye, what you want to avoid. I recommend for the 30 days you just cut everything out. There's In yogurt and dairy, there's casein proteins, which studies are kind of showing more and more that they're not good for us. They're also very highly addictive, and they can cause inflammation. So there's different camps, I guess, but I think for what we're trying to accomplish, or at least so you feel how you're supposed to feel, it'd be best to cut it out. And yogurt for women, everybody I talk to is like, it's one of the hardest
I
things.
like to point out like too fat.
Right.
Yeah, for people.
The fat free, I'd imagine there's definitely more sugar in that if you actually look at the label.
Yeah, why don't you just have a Snickers bar? That's how I look at it. If there's that much sugar in it,
Wow.
I'd
Well,
rather
right.
if I'm gonna have sugar, I'd rather have
You
a
might as
cookie.
well, you might as well have something
Yeah,
like,
that you like.
all out
I don't
there.
know,
Yeah.
So even like whole grain bread, or anything like that, whole grain bread actually is as much sugar as basically it's equal to 2 tablespoons of sugar, just straight sugar in your mouth for 2 slices. It does the same thing, and that all goes back to just insulin. It has the same effect on your body. At a macro level, they both spike your insulin. So, let's see here. In terms of like, a lot of people ask about what kind of supplements you should take.